We're back. Let me just try this again. Hopefully it works this time. The 925. Please work. So strange. I can find everyone else, but I can't find Meghann. But I can find you on everything else. 925. What is everyone drinking right now? I just had blue tea. Very random. I would like. Oh yes, there we go.
Sorry, guys, that was half Instagram, probably half me as well. Terrible at tech.
Hey.
Hi, I'm so
Hey.
sorry about that. Hey,
No, no, that's
hey.
okay.
I was like searching for you, and it was just like not looking for you at all. I was like, where is she? This is not happening.
Oh, we sorted it out.
Okay, so welcome, everyone again. So today I'm joined with the lovely Meghann Riley. She's a successful money and lifestyle coach who's helped hundreds of people gain confidence and find their way to financial freedom. And today she's been kind enough to let me pick her brains to see what that journey looks like for not only myself, but everyone else. So hi, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to chat.
Yeah, how are you today?
I'm good. I'm good. Waking up in Playa del Carmen, Mexico, so can't complain. It's always a beautiful day here.
Because you were in New York for a while before, right? So it must be, I know New York is a super, I love New York, but it must be so nice to have escaped the cold there right now.
Yeah, it's too cold there. And now that I can work from anywhere, I'm kind of like, why live through a full winter anymore?
Yeah, I heard it was like minus like 10 or something like that. It was like minus a lot, right? In New York.
Maybe. We do the Fahrenheit system. So the Celsius
Oh,
thing means nothing to me. It's cold there though,
mhm,
yes. Although it's been like a pretty mild winter, so it really hasn't been like as
mhm.
bad as usual.
Yeah. I saw on Instagram your lovely apartment tour. How long have you been there?
It's only been 10 days since I've gotten back. Yeah. So I don't know if you kind of know, I was meant to arrive here in November, but I was
Mhm.
traveling and I fell and I fractured my heel. So I went back home for the holidays and had a few months of recovery.
Hmm.
But at least I was home for the holidays, which was pretty nice.
Yeah, yeah, that's nice. Are you fully recovered now as well?
Yeah, I mean, more or less. There's still like some things I have to work on in physical therapy, but as far as like day to day, I'm good.
Hmm.
It might be a little while before I'm like running marathons.
Okay, so let's jump straight in. So tell me your story. How did you end up going from your corporate life to traveling the world and having complete freedom?
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was pretty organic. There wasn't necessarily like a break point where I made the decision and decided to do it. It was something I always wanted to do and always envisioned for myself, but I honestly didn't know the how. Um, and then one day in late 2018, I got laid off and I just decided like I don't want to do this corporate life anymore. Well, I mean, that's not necessarily true. I didn't want to do it, but I also didn't necessarily think that I wouldn't be going back. I was laid off, and I think I got to a point where I was like, rather than do what I would normally do, which is go find another job, I was like, right now, I think for the first time in my life, I feel like I've got a little bit of space and time and financial cushion to say, I can try something different and see where it leads. And so that's what I did. I just said, and I think, of course, this was something I always wanted to do, and there was a lot of fear involved. I mean, I think there's like, for me, it was like, there's the personal fear of, okay, I can go and do this and take this leap. And then I think this is what a lot of people are afraid of when they want to do this, but they don't take the leap. It's because, okay, I'll go and I'll do it and I'll spend a good chunk of time and money traveling, and then I'll come back into my quote unquote normal life, and maybe I'll be in a worse off position. I'll have taken a career break. So I'm going to have to scramble to find a job. Maybe now I won't have that leverage of already, you know, they say, and I was a recruiter for years. They say it's easier to find a job when you have a job. And there's some truth to that. It does take the pressure off, but it's also easy to find a job when you have internal confidence and you know what skills you have to offer and you have a financial cushion. So that can really help and give you the permission to take more risks. And that's what I work on with my clients as a coach, is like, let's develop that internal confidence. Let's develop your like holistic skill set and like put together a financial plan. But, you know, of course, so I had that fear that like, I'll come back in a deficit. I'll come back having spent a bunch of money, so in a worse financial position. But it got to a point where like the pain of staying the same was worse than the pain of change. And I decided like, and this is what I want everyone to realize, like, you are worth it. We are worth it. We only have one life in theory. Maybe we have more than one life, but we only have one life, like in this body, in the situation that we're in now. And so take that risk, like put together a plan. And like, for me, you know, there's the fear of spending the money to do it, but it's like, what is the money for if not to enjoy your life, if not to do the things, use it as a tool to do the things you want to do. And, you know, even if I were to spend that money and like come back at a little bit of a deficit, I knew like I'm going to have an experience that's going to be so worth it. And what ended up happening is I went and traveled and then discovered that people kept asking me like, how were you able to do this? And I realized like, oh, I now have this whole skill set that has suddenly come together that I didn't even think about. Like I worked in finance for 4 years. I was a corporate recruiter. And now I've taken this sabbatical to travel, and I can blend all of these things to help people not necessarily become a digital nomad, but like really fully own their lives and be like, this is what I actually want to do and envision for my life. And like, how do I do that? You know, by, you know, getting the mindset, crafting my resume, using my skills, using my finances, like all of the above to go for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like relate to that so much. I think one, I took way too long to do this, and it was for all those reasons that you just said. It was I was worried about taking a break, because when I did the first time, it was actually harder to get back into like the corporate world. But then also I didn't actually want to. That wasn't my motivation anyway. So yeah, I totally like relate to everything you just said. So then, when did you start your money and lifestyle coaching business? Because when I met you were definitely doing that. That was like over a year ago. So how long before then?
Yeah, it was in 2020. So I left my corporate recruitment job, and then I sublet my apartment. I took like a little sabbatical. I went to Australia, Indonesia, Peru. And it was when I was traveling that, you know, friends back home, or I realized people were like, because I'd always traveled when I had a corporate job, and people would always ask me, how do you travel so much? How can you afford to travel so much? And I never really understood the question, because I was just like, well, that's what's important to me. So that's what I spend my time and money doing. But when I took like a large chunk of time, that's when I realized people were like, no, really, how are you doing this? Like if I lost my job, I would be out of money. I would be scared. I would be scrambling for the next job. And I was like, oh, I can help people with this. So I came back from my travels, and that was like I got home right before like COVID was already kind of brewing. I was in Indonesia, and yeah, I got home before it was like a thing, before people really had trouble getting out. But then everyone was stuck at home, and I had gotten this idea in my head, like, oh, I can help people and I can do this, because I absolutely do not want to go back to my corporate recruiting job. I do not want to be spending my days scrolling LinkedIn and sending people messages to work in like media and advertising anymore. So it kind of ended up being interesting timing, because obviously like it was a time in our world where like everybody was questioning what they were doing, and people were more interested in this sort of thing and questioning priorities.
Yeah, definitely. I think like that time definitely made a huge portion of the population kind of reassess their values in life and what they really wanted, and that's probably part of why there's so many recruitment issues at the moment. Yeah, and one of the things that you just said like 2 seconds ago about it would have been a worse situation staying than pursuing your dream. I think that's like so relatable for everyone. So put a thumbs up if you agree. But yeah, I relate to that so much. So when you finally did kind of start this lifestyle, how easy was it to meet people? Because obviously you went, I imagine you went by yourself, yeah?
Yeah, it was really easy. I mean, I did have a connection in Playa del Carmen. It was a funny story. So during COVID, I became friends with someone on Instagram that, like, you know, and I was following like personal finance people and people who were really into like house hacking and things like that. And I think it was through like the personal finance community, I connected with this girl, Kelly, and we were just, you know, kind of corresponding. And then this was, I guess, right before, like in December 2020, so heading into 2021, she was like, listen, I'm bored out of my mind. I'm in Indiana. I'm single. Like, you know, this is when people like weren't really seeing people. She's like, I would love to get a group together to rent a house, work remotely together. Would you be into that idea? And I was like, absolutely. And
One Playa del Carmen?
What's that?
One Playa del Carmen as well?
So what we ended up doing is she was like, oh, you know, is there a place you would like to go? And I suggested Merida, which is, yeah, it's like 2 hours from Playa del Carmen, because I traveled to Mexico a lot, but I hadn't been to Merida, and I knew that would be like a really nice place to rent a house, because they have like these beautiful colonial homes. And we rented a house as a group, and then I was traveling after that, and she was traveling a little bit. She ended up in Playa del Carmen and decided to rent an apartment. And I had been to Playa del Carmen a bunch before, and I almost just like skipped it this time because I felt like, oh, I've been there. But she kind of tapped into the digital nomad community. So then I kind of swung through and saw her. And then I went back home to New York, and I was like, what am I doing? It's cold here. And now it's March. I'm freezing. And so I rented out my apartment and came back here. And you know, it was really nice because she kind of introduced me to people, and then it was very easy. But it's also so easy, like once you get here and you've been here, you spend time here, you know, like there's such a great community here. And I think that like when you know where the digital nomad hubs are, all of those places have a community. And once you get hooked in, there's WhatsApp groups and like lots of meetups, and it's so easy to meet people. But really all it takes is going to a cafe and striking up a conversation with someone to get you in the door.
Yeah, that's basic. I mean, I met you through just a pool. I was at a pool at a hotel. That's how I met you. And everyone else. So it's like it's so easy to meet people. Yeah. Out of everywhere that you've traveled, because I ask this of a lot of people, and I always get like the similar answer. But out of everywhere where you've traveled, where's been the place that's been easiest to meet people? Would you say it is probably Playa del Carmen?
Yeah, for me, it's such an easy place to come to. But you know, like Canggu and Bali is also one of those like digital nomad hubs, and it's pretty easy to meet people there. But yeah, I mean, Mexico in general is just somewhere I've traveled to a bunch because it's so easy from the US, and I'm really comfortable in Mexico in general. But Playa del Carmen in particular is like just such a hub for nomads.
Yeah, it really is. And I had a very similar story, the same as you. How I heard about Playa del Carmen was I was following a girl on Instagram, just like, you know, Instagram friend. And I was just seeing just the life that people were having there during, well, during COVID actually. And it was just from that I kept just like seeing things, and that's what kind of what drew me to Playa del Carmen like initially. But yeah, it's such a cool place, and the same with Canggu as well. It's the same vibe where you just go and you can just meet so many people by just having coffee.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. That's really all you have to do to make it work as a digital nomad or meet people.
Yeah. So what would you say is the biggest misconception about digital nomads, location independent people, corporate hippies, as I like to say sometimes? What's the biggest misconception?
Yeah, I think there are a couple. I think number one, that everyone's on some sort of permanent vacation. I think that's absolutely not true. You know, everyone has their kind of normal Monday to Friday routine. A lot of the time, I do think it's really nice. There's more flexibility. People tend to have more flexible schedules, which is really nice. You're generally in a smaller, tight knit community where there's more room to like do fun things during the week. But you know, people are working and like it's a normal job. People go to the grocery store, like it's not permanent vacation. And then I think the other thing is that people think you have to be like rich to live this lifestyle. And like I just said, you know, people are working, like people are actually like they're working real jobs, they're making money and like they are, but they're, you know, often it could be less expensive to be a digital nomad depending on where you're nomading. And for a lot of people who are doing this, the place they're living is often less expensive than back home.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's, yeah, one of the huge misconceptions is that back home we're probably paying like the same prices we would back home, if not a lot less. So it is actually more cost effective. And I can't remember if it was on your story or if it was on a blog that I read this or saw this, but when you first started traveling, I read somewhere, I think it was on your Instagram, that you were living on a very small amount for a long time. Or was
Probably.
that in New York? Yeah.
I mean, well, I think that I did find ways. I mean, New York, as you know, is a very expensive city, and I think like when I first started out in New York, I was on a very low salary, and it almost like it was like a blessing and a curse, right? I think ultimately over the long term, that worked out well for me because it taught me to be really resourceful at a young age. And then as I got pay increases, I already was really accustomed to living on a pretty low salary. So I was like, okay, let me take like the at least a portion of my raise and commit that to like future me, to investing. And obviously that's what I help my clients do. But yeah, I mean, at various points, depending on where you're living as a digital nomad too, like you can do it very, very affordably.
Yeah, definitely. Where's the cheapest country? So where's like the most cost effective country that you've been to and that you've traveled in?
Um, Thailand's pretty affordable.
Hmm.
And I mean, that I was just backpacking and traveling. I haven't done the digital nomad thing there. But then even within Mexico, you know, it really depends on where you go. Even within a particular country, as you know, there are places that become a little bit more expensive because they maybe become really popular. Like Playa del Carmen has definitely, as someone in the comments is saying, like Chiang Mai is a great, yeah, since some
Yeah.
time there. That's
Yeah.
a great.
Well, now it's gone up.
Were you just there?
Yeah, I'm in Thailand at the moment. I'm in Koh Phangan, and Koh Phangan's insane for prices at the moment. Anyway, like yeah, it's so hard to find accommodation here. I feel like it's all of our faults.
Right? Like, yeah, Playa del Carmen has definitely gotten more expensive than it was. But then within Mexico, Merida is really, you know, pretty affordable. And I think prices have gone up there. I haven't been there in a couple of years, but it's still like probably a lot less expensive than Playa del Carmen. And it's only 2 hours away. So, you know,
Mhm.
even within any given country, like you can find the places that are kind of, I guess, a little bit like undiscovered gems.
Yeah. definitely. Merida is definitely one of those places as well. I almost I actually considered going there for like a month after Playa del Carmen. And because it was like a little bit cheaper as well. And it's just like a beautiful city as well. Like I love all the buildings there. It's so colorful. Yeah. When you're sort of, obviously you've settled in Playa del Carmen a bit more now. But what is the sort of three things that you look for in a place when you're choosing to stay there for a long time?
The Wi-Fi has to be good.
Mm-hmm.
Good cafes and a community. I think the community is so important. It really makes a difference. You know, it's good to have just like a support network.
Yeah, definitely. And so, when it comes to saving money, what is the biggest? We've talked about misconceptions about digital nomads. Now, what's the biggest misconception about saving money that people might not realize?
Yeah. I think a huge one is people think they should wait until they make more money. And I hear that all the time. People are always like, "Oh, I'll do it. I'm going to hire you, but let me wait until I get my promotion or I start making more money, when I get my raise." And I mean, you can play that game until you're 80 years old, or you can play that game until you make $1 million. You know, there are people who make $1 million a year and spend $1,001 a year. You know what I mean? Like, people think, oh, I don't make enough money to save any money. And I think that that's really not true for most people. You know, it's just a matter of like sitting down. And obviously, this is what I do with my clients, but sitting down and thinking about like, what is the life you want to achieve? What is your goal? And like, what are your values? And then I find 9 times out of 10 when I go through spending with my clients that what they say their values are, like their spending doesn't actually match that. And that's fine. That's human nature. You know, it's very easy to like deal with what's in front of you at the moment without thinking long term. But like, if you actually kind of look at things a different way, you'll probably find you're spending a lot of money on things you don't actually care about. And when you put a number on it, you're like, oh my God, I spend that much ordering takeout or on things on Amazon or clothes that like I get tired of after 2 weeks, you know, or once I buy them, the novelty is worn off. And like in reality, I want freedom. I want to be able to, you know, travel the world. I want to just not have to worry about money, really. I think that's ultimately the end goal is nobody cares about the money. They just don't really want to worry about money. But if you're constantly spending it on things you don't care about, then you're probably worrying about it a lot more than you need to.
Yeah, definitely. Once I'm 5 dresses into the month, that's when I start worrying. You're helping me with.
Yeah, it's about, I think we don't realize there's always an opportunity cost. And not to say like we can't have fun with our money. We absolutely should. And like clearly, like if you love pretty dresses, that's something you value, you should build it into your budget. But whenever you spend money, there's the opportunity cost. It's like we think of like, oh, I'm buying this, but like I don't have any other plans for this $30, say, right? So it's between buying it or not buying it. And if I don't buy it, well, then I just have this money. But like really the opportunity cost is like literally all the other things in the whole world you could do with that, including, you know, like saving it and investing it so that it multiplies, and then it opens up a whole other level of opportunities. Not to say you shouldn't buy like little fun things, but there's always a trade-off, and just the trade-off is hidden and we never think about it.
Yeah. What you just said, that was everything that was in my mind. That's everything that's in my mind when I do try and I say no. Because sometimes it's there and I think, well, if I'm not going to buy the dress, what am I going to do with it? And this is where the next one comes in of what's the first step that someone should do or take, sorry, when they want to start saving, start investing. Like, what's the first step that they should really do?
Yeah, I think the first thing you have to do is really just track your spending. and look at where it goes, because I think that when people look at it, they're always surprised. They're like, oh my gosh, I really spend that much money on XYZ. And then the first goal should be having an emergency fund, because no matter what, you know, things happen, accidents happen. As I mentioned, I just fractured my heel. That was an unexpected expense. And you're just like, if that happens and you don't have money in the bank, then that can put a real stress and a strain on like an already stressful situation. And, you know, especially, I'm sure there's a lot of people watching this who want to be digital nomads. You know, you want to be able to do that and have like the ease and comfort of knowing that, like, God forbid anything should happen, you have money that you can at least like buy yourself a plane ticket home.
Yeah, yeah. And it's about being comfortable and not having to think about it and worry about it at the end of the month as much. And I saw that you have some really good, I actually have them open on my laptop right now. Your free resources. You have two that I found on your link tree, which is on Meghann's Instagram profile, which I will tag at the end. But there's the Nomad Entrepreneur Money Tracker, and you also have the Spending Tracker. So can you tell me what's the difference between the two of those?
Yes. I think I put the Nomad one up again last night preparing for this call, because I've done a presentation here in Playa del Carmen for the Nomad community. And, you know, I actually haven't looked at it in depth. It's essentially the same sheet, but I think on the Nomad tracker, I maybe have a hypothetical budget tab.
Yes,
so
I saw that.
If you're a nomad, what's really helpful, and I do a hypothetical tab with my non-nomad clients too, for whatever their scenario is, but the hypothetical tab is like, okay, you track your spending where you are now, but as you know, as a nomad, your expenses are variable and often your income is variable. So you have to account for variable income as a nomad, or anyone who is an entrepreneur and works for themselves. So anyone who is an entrepreneur and works for themselves, in addition to your emergency fund, I highly recommend something I call a buffer fund, which is after you fund your emergency fund, you should have a buffer fund that allows you to pay yourself the same amount of money every month. So think about what your minimum amount is that you make every month, and within your budget, carve out a number that you add to a buffer fund every month, so that when you go through periods where you make less money, you can pull from your buffer fund to supplement, to cover. Or when you are going from a less expensive country to a more expensive country, you can say, and this is where the hypothetical tracker tab comes in, you look at what you're spending. If you're in Mexico now, for example, you look at what you're spending now, but the hypothetical tab is for you to say, okay, if I want to go to, let's say, Europe for the summer, and I know Portugal is more expensive, literally plan out, okay, well, this is what I'm spending in Mexico now, but like, what is rent? Let me do a little bit of just like a quick Google search. Let me look at Airbnb. What can I expect to pay in rent? What are my costs going to be? All of these things I already know I spend money on. I'm going to be spending money probably on the same stuff, just in a different country where it's more expensive. So let me look at like what my total expenses are going to be there. And then, do I make enough money to support that? So can I afford to go to Portugal? Or do I have enough money in my buffer fund that I'm willing to pull from and cover the difference in expenses? So it's just a really helpful planning tool. So if you're looking at my link tree and you're a nomad, look at the Nomad tracker.
Yeah, I'm gonna like add it at the end of this, and then everyone can link onto it, because I'm gonna definitely be using this month, because I'm fully freelance now, so I get to use it. So when it comes to saving, another one of the obstacles that a lot of people have, the first one is obviously that they feel like they don't earn enough, and I think another really big one is that they feel like they have debts to pay off, and they feel like they can't save because there's this weight of debt hanging on them, and they just want to like get that done first, but it's maybe a lot, it might be a small amount. What's kind of your take on debt management and how people should approach that?
Yeah, yeah. I think there's so much stigma around debt, and there really shouldn't be. You know, obviously debt, like anything else, is a tool, and in a lot of ways we should be really grateful that it is an option to us because it allows us to do things today. It's an abundance, right? At the same time, you know, you want to be thoughtful about how you use it. Using debt to learn something, to invest in yourself, to gain a new skill is perhaps worth it and something worth getting into debt to do because you can literally do the ROI. Like, I'm investing in a coach or taking a class to learn a new skill that's going to pay for itself.
Mm-hmm.
And you can run the numbers and say, like, I'm going to be able to pay off the debt that I'm taking. But, you know, consumer debt, if that's something that you've done in the past, you want to avoid that. You know, that's hustling backwards, as they say. We want to be paying for our future and not our past. But at the same time, if you have debt, do not shame yourself. Like, it is something that is common, and there's no use like crying over spilt milk, right? It's just, how do I make a different decision going forward? How do I really envision the life I want and come up with a plan to get rid of it? And it's really just about being committed to doing it and allocating. My advice would be, again, tracking your spending, using the tracker, creating a budget, but putting a line item in there every month where you're putting money towards it to get rid of it, so that at a certain point you then can start investing. And depending on it, and this gets to be a little bit more complicated, and I work with a lot of clients on this, but like, depending on what the interest rate is on the debt, it might make sense to also be investing at the same time as you're paying off debt. If it's really high interest rate, you want to get rid of it first before you invest. But and you can always maybe refinance. Like, I help clients with that, like refinance it to a really low interest rate, which might spread it out and make it a little bit more manageable so you can do other things, and you know, but yeah, just put together a plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, what you just said about investing, that's really interesting, because I think yeah, like growing up, we're always taught to be absolutely afraid of debt, that it's the worst thing in the world. But then we're given credit cards and student loans, and it's kind of put onto us, and so where was I going with that? What was I going? I completely lost my train of thought then. That was very strange. Yes, what I was going to say was, yes, so the idea of not being able to spend money or to invest when you're in debt, I find that's really interesting, because I didn't I wouldn't feel confident, I guess, investing while I was trying to pay off like something. But that's good. So as long as it's like a 0% interest, very low interest, that's something that you can still be open to.
Yeah. Yeah, like if you have the option to refinance into a 0%, but I do caution people to be careful with that, because if you refinance, you absolutely want to have a plan to pay it off before the interest rate balloons, because that is kind of what happens with those. But debt is a tool like anything else, and like really wealthy people, that is how they leverage debt. Like, that is how the rich get richer. They borrow at a lower percent interest rate than they invest at. So if you can borrow money at, like, you know, a lot of people who maybe can afford to buy a house in cash, you might still elect to take a mortgage because you know you can pay the mortgage at a 6% rate right now, which is what they're at, but you're investing at 11%. So in that case, you absolutely would want to leverage debt, and clearly that's how like billionaires do it. They borrow money to fund their businesses, expand their businesses, and a lot of them just don't even take a salary. They always just borrow against their companies.
This is the stuff we're not taught in school. We need to be taught this in school. We really do. We learn this as like adults when it's too late sometimes.
Yeah, that's why it's really important to educate yourself as an adult, because I hate to say this, but it's almost by design. Like, if everyone knew how to use money, then we wouldn't all be stuck working 9-to-5 jobs and buying things we don't need and keeping ourselves in this cycle. But,
Hmm.
you know, the economy needs people to go to work every day and buy shit to keep the economy moving, right? But I don't think that's the
Yeah.
world we should live in. Like, we can all have money and still, like, I don't think people would be less productive if they didn't have to go to a job. I argue the world would be a better place because then people would be doing the things they actually want to do and helping people. Like, I used to go to a job and hire people in advertising to sell Coca-Cola. Was that helping the
Hmm.
world? No. Like, Coke is sugar water that's poisoning people. Now I have the financial freedom to help other people get their money in order so they can do the things they want to do and not be, you know, slaves to this corporate machine. So I think there's a lot of good that can come from people educating themselves financially.
Oh, 100%. And have you dealt with clients before that have had like a lot of debt and they've managed to come out of it and there's a light at the end of the tunnel and they've prospered?
Absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things to help people with. Like, a lot of my clients like make really quick work of it. Like, $30,000 in 3 months, $40,000 in
Woo!
5 months. Yeah, like, people like crush it once they have a strategy and the motivation and they're working towards a different. Once you can visualize the end goal and you
Mhm.
have a plan, it goes quick. And like, clients of mine will
Mhm.
be like, I feel like I'm manifesting money. And it literally, that's what manifestation is almost. Like, you literally visualize a different outcome and kind of decide to become it. And now you're suddenly like embodying that person who wants this thing instead of like whatever it was, you know, before you saw the alternative. So, and once you have a goal, things just happen so quick.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's, yeah, definitely 100%. So in terms of yourself, what's your goal? What's some of your goals for 2023?
I think,
Personal or professional, travel?
yeah. I think I'm really focused on my business for the rest of the year.
Mhm.
And also leaning into like digital nomad life. Before I was kind of subletting my apartment here and there. It would be like a few months at a time, and I've sublet it for the long term, which gives me a bit more freedom to really embrace like just seeing how things unfold.
Yeah, definitely. And because what would be your advice to budding entrepreneurs, especially women, who want to leave their job? They've got the plan together, they want to do it. What would be your advice to them on their first step?
Yeah. I think that if you can visualize it, if this is something in your heart that you want to do, like, know it's something that you're meant to do. So go for it. Obviously, have a plan. If you don't have a plan yet, like, invest in yourself to get a plan, because I think that for me was like a really hard step, is just deciding to invest in myself and go for it. But I think what's helpful to remember is like, if you know you're meant for more than where you're at now, I love this phrase, like, you're already living your worst case scenario. You can always go back. You know what I mean? It's like, try it, prepare yourself, come up with
Mhm.
a plan, um, have the funds, like, have a financial backstop to do it. But like, worst case scenario, you can always come back probably and get a similar job, a similar apartment. Like, there's no reason not to go for it. And I think when you remember, like, you're already living your worst case scenario, like, it gets a lot easier. You can always come back to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. My mum always used to say to me just before I went, she was like, Nicole, it's the UK is always going to be here. Fingers crossed, but it's always going to be here. You can just come back. It's just go for it. And I think that's a really good message for anyone is just do it, basically. Just go for it.
Yeah.
And so obviously when you do it, sometimes you do it by yourself, sometimes you go with a partner, sometimes you go with friends to start this life. But it's really important to look after your mental and physical health. So one thing that, do you have like a routine, or do you have like one thing in the week that you try and do to just make sure that things are zen?
Yeah, yeah. I have a morning routine, and I try to schedule my days. And no day is gonna look the same. Obviously, like priorities shift day to day. You know, today we had this scheduled. Some days I have client calls, some days I don't have client calls. But like every Sunday night, I kind of look at my plan for the week and really think about like what do I have to do, and plan ahead. But I do have like social events that are kind of like I go every week. My morning routine, I have my cafes that I like to go to, and I think also just giving yourself permission to slow down. I think it can be particularly for new digital nomads, what can be tough is like this abundance of like, it's like going to a buffet for the first time and you're like, oh my gosh, there's so many options, and like there's so many events and activities and fun things to do, and I have so many new friends, and there's this whole community. And I think it's really what's key is like giving yourself permission to slow down and say no to things, because if you're in this for the long haul, like that event will be there next week. It's okay to skip a social outing, and it's different from travel. Like when you travel and you're like, oh, let me schedule every single day, let me make sure I see all the touristy things to do. It's absolutely a mindset shift. So I think there's just importance in recognizing that, and like not trying to do everything at once. Like recognize like you are living here, and like create the same schedule you do at home.
Yeah, definitely. Being able just to say no sometimes, and you don't have to always say yes and be a people pleaser. You can just say no, they'll still be there.
Yeah.
The parties are always there, the events are always there. Yeah, definitely. So we know, so your favorite place to settle is Playa del Carmen, but where's your favorite place that you've traveled to, like the most interesting place you've traveled to that you just like love?
That's a tough one. There's a few. Mexico in general, I love. Playa del Carmen, as you know, is not exactly a cultural center, but like Mexico on the whole is just such a cultural place. Every time I come to Mexico, there are new places I want to go and new cities I want to explore. They have those pueblos mágicos that are all just like so cultural and gorgeous. So I love Mexico. Cappadocia, Turkey was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. It
Say that again. What's the name of that?
Cappadocia. It's
Uh-huh.
kind of like in the desert, and there's basically like all these rock formations. They call them fairy chimneys. And I guess it was when like the Christians were exiled from Turkey, they went into hiding and lived in these caves. And the caves, I think they say they're not quite sure how the chimneys got like they've had like these spiral tops, and they're caves anyway. So the Christians lived in these caves, and they painted like frescoes on the ceilings in some of them that are
Mhm.
so preserved. But just the landscape is incredible. If you've seen pictures of it, like you'll see people hot air ballooning above the landscape is really popular to do there, because and the rocks are like pink.
Mhm.
Have you seen it?
Mhm. Okay, now you say it, I do know the image now. I think I saw some friends last year doing the hot air balloons going across. That's really cool because I may be going to Turkey this year. So for the first time I haven't been.
Oh,
So yeah, that's awesome.
yeah,
And so it's Turkey, Mexico in general, and another one.
yeah. And then one of just my most fun travel experiences was backpacking Australia. That like if you want to do a backpacking trip, like that was awesome. Like it was
Mhm.
what I didn't expect about it was everyone kind of does the same route. Um, and that was really neat because like the people you saw, I started in Cairns, which is like the north of the East Coast, and most people do, or some people might start in the south and go north. But once you do that, you see the same people all along the route, and you make friends that you kind of travel with the whole way. And it's like, oh, I'll see you in Brisbane in 2 days. Where are you staying? And like, it was a really awesome experience. So for anybody who wants like a backpacking experience, I highly recommend Australia.
Nice. And are you part of any oh gosh, like digital nomad groups like Wi-Fi Tribe or I think it's Remote Year is another one. Are you part of any of those?
No, I actually haven't done those. And obviously, I know a lot of people who have done those and they love them. And I do think those can be a great way to get started. Or some people who are really comfortable with the nomad lifestyle do seem to join those when they're going to a new location, because it seems to give you like, you know, you don't have to worry about anything. They take care of like the apartment, and you have built-in friends and built-in activities. So it can be like really easy. But I haven't done one of those.
No, yeah, neither have I. Yeah, kind of interesting. That's why I keep asking that question because I'm like, I want more information. So is there anywhere that you haven't been to yet, that you really want to go to that's on your sort of list, your bucket list?
Yes, I mean everywhere. But I think my short list is maybe Greece.
You haven't been to Greece?
No, I haven't.
Oh, you will love it. It's beautiful. Is there somewhere in Greece that you want to go in particular, or just like the whole thing?
The whole thing. I do have a friend who is living in Athens and she loves it. So part of me was thinking like maybe base myself in Athens for a little bit and then like, you know, the Greek island.
Yeah. Oh no, yeah. I hope you get to do it because it's honestly so lovely and the food is like amazing. Are you a foodie as well?
Yes.
Yes.
I love Mediterranean
Yeah, the food is
food.
so
So
it's the best food there. There's like one dish that I really like, which is feta cheese and a phyllo pastry with sesame seeds and honey on top. I think it's called like phyllo milo or something like that. But yeah, definitely that's like the best food
that
there.
sounds awesome. I'm sold. I'm
Okay,
going.
we're going to Greece. Okay, so that's kind of towards the end of our chat now. I'd like to say thank you so much for coming on. I learned so much about, especially with like the debt topic and being able to invest. Is there actually on the investing part, is there an app or what's the easiest way for someone who, like me, has no idea about investing? What's the easiest way to kind of introduce yourself into that?
Yeah. I mean, investing doesn't have to be complicated. I think people think it's like this really scary thing. And of course, you know, I know your audience might not be all US based. So the actual apps you use might vary. I mean, for people in the US, I generally recommend like E-Trade, Fidelity, Charles Schwab. Um, but open an account on any of these, or just Google online brokerage, your country, and you'll come up with some options. Of course, you know, do a little research to make sure that they're legit. But the ones I just mentioned are great and I highly recommend them. But open an account. It literally takes 4 minutes. Like, people have timed this. You can open these accounts in 4 minutes. And then I just recommend buying index funds to people. Index funds are like, buy a fund that tracks the overall market. When I say the overall market, it's the S&P 500. That is when people refer to the stock. And this is getting this requires a bit more explanation than the time we have here. But that is the benchmark. When people say the stock market was up today, they're talking about the S&P 500. Google S&P 500 fund and your brokerage that you open it at, and they will have a fund that tracks the stock market. And then when you buy one of those funds, you're buying 500 companies across all sectors. You're diversified. So that's what you want to do, because if you're just buying one stock, that's like going to the roulette table and putting all your money in on red. You know, that could 50% chance, you know, it's going to go up, 50% chance you lose everything, you know? So like, you don't want to just do that. Buy an index fund, and like, over time, the stock market always goes up. And on average, historically, it's returned about 11% per year on average. So, you know, you've got to be in it to get your share of the market. And so you want to start as early as possible. And like I said, if you have debt, you kind of want to balance that and come up with a plan to ideally get rid of high interest debt. But if you have a lower interest debt, it's fine to start investing simultaneously. And I think there's real value to that, because then you see your money growing and it motivates you even more to work on both sides of that equation, getting rid of debt and investing, and getting rid of debt so that the money that has to go to debt every month now can go to investing once it's all gone.
Okay, that's really good. I'm gonna put the link to that below as well. And I'm going into a tangent now, but if you had to, so now we're talking about investing. This might be a controversial question, but would you recommend people having a planned pension or investment?
A planned
There's
pension,
always
that's
something
like a thing. What is
sorry.
a
Oh,
planned?
sorry. I suppose it depends on what country you're in. But so in the UK we have our government pension, but you can also have private pensions, which is you put a bit of money aside each month and it goes into a pension, and when you retire, it gets fed to you in drops that way. But then I've been hearing a lot of chatter amongst people who some people prefer to just start investing, and then that becomes their pension pot. And then other people like to go down the more traditional route of just having the sort of the saving kind of style of pension. So kind of where do you stand on that?
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know a ton about pensions, but I believe pensions are kind of like annuities in the US. You can basically buy into something and it's like guaranteed income. And those historically, they way underperform the market. There can be a safety with that, but when you understand and you become financially literate, like the stock market is safe and it goes up over time. You do have to like kind of get comfortable with it and plan a little bit. You do want to have like some money in cash because like, and this is not something you have to worry about until retirement age, but there is like a little bit of a strategy to taking your money out because there could be a year where the stock market drops. Like it's not a linear 11% per year. But the bottom line is over time, the stock market is, you're going to end up with way more money if you invest your money than doing these really safe things that ultimately are not serving you. And putting your money in a savings account for retirement, you're going to be working forever if you try to do that. Do not do that. You have to invest your money.
That's good. Yeah, I'm taking that away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for your time. I hope you have a really nice day in Playa del Carmen. And yeah, thank you so much. And I will hopefully see you again soon this year, hopefully.
Yes, that would be awesome. Keep me posted.
Thank you.
I'm so curious
Yeah,
where
I'm going to put all the links to Meg's link tree underneath, and everything that we discussed today. And yes, that's it. So thank you everyone for coming to watch as well, and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye. Thanks for having me. Bye.